Ladies and gentlemen, members and friends, Matt Bailey here, your branch director for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. Lovely to see you. October Outturn is fast approaching us. Now, Malt of the Month is a delightful 19-year-old whisky from Distillery 19, no less, which we've talked about on the channel with Lachlan Watt, who is at Whisky Now. So we've had a chat about what that is, what that whiskey is, and how it's unusual that we're releasing a 19-year-old single cask as Malt of the Month, but it's at a cracking good price. However, we're also releasing another Heresy release. I'm actually not even sure we still call them Heresy bottlings. We kind of do internally, but it doesn't say that on the label. What it is basically our chance to experiment for Ewan Campbell in the spirits team and Kai Evelo in spirits to experiment and play around with great spirit and see where it ends up, and then we release it as something a little bit different, often not as a single cask, sometimes not even as a single malt, in this case a blended malt, and see what members think of it. And it's often offered up at a really attractive price, and it's a chance for us to go, what do you think of this? And if it sells really well and members love it, that gives us a sense of direction for flavour. That's really important. Flavour is what's at the front of what the SMWS does. If it gives us an indication of what members like in flavour, then we work on other things like that. So it's sort of builds part of our direction for our spirits team. However, let's just touch on real quickly here. What is a blended malt? So in the wide world of whiskey, most whiskey consumed around the world is blended whiskey, not to be confused with blended malt, blended whiskey. Your Johnny Walkers, your Chivas Regals, your Ballantines, all those kind of things, where it's a mixture of malt whiskey and grain whiskey. Grain whiskey is typically, depending on how it's made and where it's made, is typically cheaper per litre to produce, much cheaper per litre than malt whiskey. Malted barley is an expensive grain compared to corn, wheat, maize, rye, or even rice in some places, not in Scotland really. But what you've got is then you've got different grains being run through and being turned into a spirit. Generally speaking, in blended whiskey as well, not always. The higher the proportion of the grain component versus the malt means it's going to be a cheaper product as well. The dearer the blended whiskey means usually the other way around, higher malt component to grain. But just outside of that for a second, 80-something%, it's like 80% of whiskey consumed worldwide is blended whiskey of those kind of brands that I mentioned before. The other portion is single malts, which is malted barley, malted spirit from single malts from one distillery. It doesn't mean one cask. That's why the SMWS specialises predominantly in single cask single malts, which is the 0.1% of whiskey consumed worldwide, really. However, for something like this is the blended malt. This is sort of the I was going to say ugly duckling of the whiskey world, but it's not really. It's just the most confusing category in a way, because it's a blended malt, which means that there's no grain whiskey used in this at all. It's malt whiskies from a range of distilleries. So it is a blended from a range of distilleries. Now that range could be two. It could be two distilleries. In fact, there have been instances in the past of blended malts being made from one distillery, where it's from two very different types of distillate from that one distillery. So, this, however, I don't think is that. This is a blended malt from two or more distilleries. We can't tell you the distilleries which we're using this, but then again, it doesn't really make any sense if we did, because what we've done with it is so different from what we'd normally do with a whiskey, like everything we do at the Society. Matured in a combination of bourbon hogsheads and ex-rum French oak barriques, and bottled at, instead of 50% like a lot of our Heresy, 58.6%, so natural cask strength in this case. When I first saw this coming through, I saw matured in a combination of French oak, ex-rum barriques. Barrique is a fancy French word for barrel. This was almost concerning for me at the time. I remember reading about it going, ooh, because personally, I think most ex-rum cask Scotch whiskey isn't very good. and I don't mean all of it, I mean a lot of that I've tried, I've gone, it's not that they're bad whiskies, it's just that the rum flavour, that sweetness from the sugar from the ex-rum cask often overpowers what was a lovely nuanced spirit. So you end up with this great single malt that's then had an extra maturation for 1, 2, 3, 4 years or something in an ex-rum cask. And I taste some of these and I go, I may as well just be drinking a rum. So all that nuance of the Scotch whisky was sort of lost. Not the case with this. Now, this will be the third or fourth time I've tasted this particular blended malt, because, as I'll show you here, we actually gave a few of these bottles away as part of a promotion very recently, and the overwhelming feedback from these people has been that it was phenomenally enjoyable. So you can see some of the photos of who picked up what on our Facebook group. If you're not in our Facebook group yet, I encourage you to just join. Just click the join button. It's obviously free. It's just you join part of the community, chatting about things, chatting about whiskey, and sometimes seeing a few giveaways and a few goodies. This one still smells like Scotch whiskey. It still has that lovely sort of like old school Scotch whiskey sort of nose to it. It's minimum 12 years aged. And it's got this, it does have the French oak rum note going on. It's got that sort of like French rum, like polished French diamond sort of a thing going on. Get it, get it, get it, get it, get it. Polished French diamond. Almost got away with that one. For any fans of R2 in our coding system, they'll know that joke. Okay, but Whiskey Barber here is 58.6%. Now, I'll just read the back. To create this expression, we opted for some rather unusual casks. So even straight up the team are like, this is unusual. Crafted from French oak, these barriques had previously been used to mature a Jamaican rum in the Cognac region of France. A Jamaican rum that was maturing in France. This is cool. We filled them with a selection of Speyside malts for a period of 28 months of additional maturation. We then blended selected casks together to create this intensely fruity dram. Fantastic stuff. I think we have some sirens going past. You can join me in saluting our emergency services. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, but this is an example of something that's really. Oh, second truck. Okay, it's the other fire truck. Okay, we're still here, folks. We're still recording. It's straight away like, light, sort of like lychee and guava, pineapple chunks, like apricot puree, but really polished, clean, sort of like bright spirit. Let's have a taste. So easily drinkable at 58.6%. Really enjoyable, really bright and tropical and sweet, but not cloyingly so. More like sort of just like tropical fruit sweet rather than sort of white sugar sweet, if that makes sense. It's bright, it's delightful. It's a truly remarkable example of how ex-rum maturation can be done well if you know what you're doing and you're careful and you manage it well. So Whiskey Barber is out in October. It's a banger of a dram, it's a banger of a whiskey, and it's just good fun to taste something that's a little bit experimentation, but really enjoyable, like really good. I would argue that Ewan and Kai and our spirits team are just getting better and better at blending and maturing and integrating flavors like this together. You'd be mad to miss a bottle of this. It's just a good weekly drinker, this one. So, Slanjivar, cheers. Thank you so much for watching. This one went on a little bit longer than I anticipated, but it's just a good chance for us to talk about some of these things, especially something as interesting as Whiskey Barber is. Until next time, cheers.